Hey everyone, welcome back to our SwiftUI series, and today we're going to be looking at creating a little bit of a game, and I like to call this one the gesture game and the bullet storm game. So by using gestures, we're going to be able to control a little character. In this case, I'm just using a blue circle to hopefully avoid the falling red circles. Oh, look at that, I'm such a pro. In our bullet storm game, hide over to the right here, and some are going to say I'm going to fail on purpose here, but we'll be able to create some game logic so people can, play around with gestures. This is a very basic example, but we're going to be able to dodge falling enemies using taps, drags, and swipes. We're going to add some difficulty and some smooth animations, as well as a real-time survival score system. You can definitely take this further, and the example project for this will be found on my GitHub pages in the description below. But otherwise, let's go ahead and dive on in to see how you can create your own gesture game, and you can use this as inspiration for your own apps on the App Store. Alrighty, let's start off by creating a new project. We're going to make sure we're on the iOS app template. We are not using the game template here, and we're going to go ahead and hit next. I'm going to call this one Bullet Storm Revenge. If you have a fun name for your game, feel free to include it here. We're going to make sure we're on SwiftUI language Swift next, and we're going to go ahead and create our project. So gesture-based games make mobile gameplay fast, intuitive, and fun. Today we're going to build the reaction-based survival game where a player must dodge falling enemies using taps, drags, and swipes. We'll balance difficulty and keep it challenging, yet fair and engaging. You can, of course, include your own logic, separate from the one I'm creating today. So let's go ahead and in our content view, let's make the game menu. And this is also, if you are going to have other game modes within your game, a good place to start. So we're going to make sure that we're using a navigation stack. So I'm going to right click on my VStack and I'm going to press embed. And under this container, I'm going to replace this with navigation stack, as we are going to and from different locations. Let's go ahead and update our placeholder text. Instead of hello world, let's go ahead and introduce players to our game modes. So in this case, maybe bullet storm game. Could even add like a little emoji if we want of a controller to make it a little bit more accessible. Controller. Wonderful. And let's update our font, and let's have this one be title. You can also bold it, add some padding, just kind of style it however you'd like. Totally up to you in these projects. All right, now let's add a navigation link. And from here, we're going to include the destination. So for our destination, we're going to go to GameView. And if you do have other games modes that you're going to include, you might want to name this one more appropriately. So go ahead and get rid of this label here. We don't need it because we're going to use our brace here. And this is where we're going to add things like the text. So let's call this one Start Game. And we can add some styles, and we can also bold it, add some padding. Now you will notice we are going to have an error, and our updates aren't going to be happening because we haven't created our GameView Swift file yet. But let's just go ahead and add some styling now. Let's add a max width to be .infinity, and then we can add a background to be blue, and the foreground style to be white. If you want to add any branding colors, go for it. I'm also going to add a clip shape here. I'm going to do the rounded rectangle with the corner radius. Cool, so let's go ahead and right click, and we're going to select a new file from template, and we're going to do SwiftUI view. Let's go ahead and do game view and create that. And now we can quickly hop back over to our content view, and we can see our navigation link in action. We can press the start game. It's going to just take us to our basic hello world because that's all the game view has, but we can at least kind of see how this is going to allow us to go back and forth. So we've created a start screen with a button to launch the game. If you have other game modes, you can add the other navigation links appropriately. Alrighty, we're going to be spending a lot of time in our game view here because this is where we're going to be focusing on the game logic. We actually don't need any imports. However, we're going to create some state private variables at the top that we're going to be using later. So I'm going to create my first state private variable, and this one is going to be the player position. So this is going to track where we are on the screen. We're going to set this to be a CG point, and we're going to have this equals CG point, and we're going to include some coordinates. So let's go ahead and choose the X and Y value, And let's set this to be 200 and 600 to start. This is going to allow us to start near the bottom. If you want to play around with this position, feel free to do so. I'm just going to add some text here so we can get the errors out of the way here. The other state private variables we're going to be adding, we'll do one for score. Right, pretty common in the game, score. And in your app, you also might want to actually create that and pass it on in a binding or use it in a leaderboard. Create another private var to track the game state. We're going to have this one be game over, and it's going to start as false. We don't want to start the game when a game over sent. That wouldn't make much sense. We'll then create another state private var, and this one will be the enemies. And we're actually going to set this to be an array of enemy. We kind of wanted a lot of those different, objects on the screen. We're going to have this then also equal an empty array. So this is going to be an array to store the enemy objects. All right, let's create another state private variable, and this is going to be the game timer. So call this one game timer. I was using my timer as like a way to measure the score as well. And we'll set this to be a timer with the question mark. And we'll do the state private var, and we'll do the score timer, which is also going to be a timer with the question mark for optional. All right, we will have an error because we don't have our enemy created just yet, but we'll be getting to that momentarily. Okay, in our variable body of SwiftUI, let's go ahead and create a Z-stack. And in here, we're going to just add a color for the background. You can make it whatever color you want. I'm going to do black because that's easy to contrast with. You can of course do white as well. And I'm going to set the dot edges ignores safe area, and we're going to set this to be all. This is just going to handle game background. Cool, and we're going to use that Z-stack because we are still layering things on top of one another. So let's go ahead and create the game title, and this is going to be some text here. Whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call mine bullet storm game. We can set the font to be large title, maybe foreground style. We'll have that black background, so maybe we can set this one to be white for maximum contrast. We can also add an offset here, and what we're going to do is we're going to do the offset, and we're going to do a Y value here, so Y being up and down. And let's set this to be -350. We can adjust this later if we need. Next, let's create the player circle. And here we'll just set it to be circle. If you want to use things like images and stuff like that, if you have like a little character, feel free to do so. I'm keeping it pretty basic today. And we're going to fill it with a color. So I'm going to do fill, and then I'm going to do color.blue, or you just do .blue, that should work too. Also add a frame, and this is where we can decide the size. Now for balancing purposes, you also want to make this quite small. I'll probably do 40 to start, and we can see how it looks after. I'll do 40 by 40, and then we're going to set the position. So this is the initial starting position of the circle to that player position that we had set up in the state private variable. All right, next we're going to be adding some dot gestures. The first one we're going to be adding is the drag gesture. Now we're not going to be using the autofill. These are all going to be things we're creating later. What I would do is I'd copy paste this dot gesture down here. In the second one, we're going to be doing the tap gesture. Again, lowercase, we're making our own. And then the third one, let's go ahead and do the long press gesture. Long press gesture. So you can do what you would like with these. For this one, I'm going to enable the dragging to dodge. The tap gesture, I'm going to have this be a tap to jump. And the long press, it's going to be a long press to jump down. Now you might even want to have the long press, maybe that gives the player invincibility, maybe you can have different power-ups that way. For my purposes today, I'm just going to make it kind of move left and right and have these little jumps with different gestures. Okay, let's now create our enemies or bad guys, the kind of bullet storm that we are dodging. We're going to do a for each for this because we're going to have tons of enemies on the screen. We're going to use our enemies that we've created above. I'm going to add a brace and say enemies. And here we're going to create the circle. And we're going to fill it. And let's do the color of red, right? Blue versus red or red versus blue. classic, and we'll add a dot frame. And for our width, let's go ahead and, in my example, I had the enemies varying in sizes just to kind of keep it a little bit more fresh and interesting. So I'm going to set this width to be enemy dot size. We haven't created this yet. We'll get to it in just a moment. And the height, so I'm going to set this to be the enemy dot. So this will allow us to have dynamic enemy sizes in our game. And we're going to set the dot position to be the enemy dot position, because I want these to be spawning dynamically. They're going to be falling from the sky all over the place. Maybe in your game they're coming from the top, bottom, right? Maybe it's a little bit more dynamic than mine where it's kind of raining from the sky. Cool. Well, let's go ahead and exit this for enemies, and we're going to add our score here. So score display. This is going to be some text, and it's just going to say time survived. And then we're going to go ahead and interpolate our score value. And then we can put seconds or sec after, just to let the players know that that's what they're being kind of judged upon. If you want to add different power-ups later on, kind of, add your own twist to this. Set the font to be title, the foreground style, white so it pops. And we'll set the offset, so dot offset. And let's also use the Y value. The other one was -350, I believe, for the Bulletstorm game. So let's try -300 for this one. Alrighty, next we'll take care of the game over message. And we're going to say if game over. That's what we had created above. We'll then put a VStack here. And we can have some text to say, hey, game over. Maybe like try again if you want, right? We can set the font. Let's do large title of this one as well. And the foreground style. Let's have this one be red, really hammering home that you lost. We can add a button as well. And we're going to add an action. And this is a function we haven't created yet. And this is going to reset game. And add a brace here. Add some text. Restart game. Let's do title 2. Hold it, and because this is going to be like kind of a button, let's go ahead and add some padding, a frame. Let's set the width to be 200 maybe. And we can set the background color, background green, and the foreground style to be white. That should pop off green easily. We can add a clip shape to this as well. Store a rectangle again. Corner radius, I think we did 12. Under the VStack, let's add a dot offset with a Y value of -200. So that should kind of shift everything on the screen. And then we're gonna go to the end of our Z stack. So it's like kind of 2 braces from the bottom before that preview. We're gonna do a dot on here. I'm gonna add our braces. We're going to go ahead and start game. So that's a function we also haven't created. We're going to be creating a whole lot of functions for this game. Cool. So outside of our view, or if you want to go 2 braces below the kind of start game here, we're going to go ahead and handle our gestures. So let's first do the tapping to make player jump. So we're going to create a variable here, and we're going to call it tap gesture. Make sure it's the exact same that we had kind of put within these player circle gestures. And we're going to conform this to be some gesture. Cool, and now we're going to reference the tap gesture that is built into Swift. So we're going to use the one with the empty brackets. We're going to do dot on ended. Now I'm going to go ahead and not use the autofill because I'm going to add a brace. I'm going to say if player position dot y is greater than 100. We'll add our brace here. This is essentially going to prevent the user from flying off the very top of the screen, right? You might want to adjust these y values as you see fit. We'll then add a with animation. So one word with camel case. And we're going to do the dot spring. That makes most sense to me for jumping. Empty arguments. We'll add another brace here, and we're going to update the player position. And we're going to have the y minus equals 50. So we're actually using this to move the player up. Oops, I have a spelling mistake here. So with animation, there we go. Okay, and let's do something similar for the long press. In my case, I'm going to be moving the player down. If you even want to go ahead and copy and paste this to save some time, it's up to you. I'm just going to do mine from scratch really quickly. So we're going to do variable long press gesture. Again, make sure it matches the one that we've created above. Some gesture here. Braces. We're going to reference the long press gesture. Now I'm going to do the one with the minimum duration. For some reason it didn't autofill. We'll just type it anyways. Minimum duration. And let's set this to be 0.5. So this way we can control how long we want that long press to be. If you want this to be a second, 2 seconds, up to you. We'll then do a dot on ended. Brace underscore in. Let's make some space here. Oh, make sure you don't have the brackets there. We just want the braces. The if player position, and this time we're going to be using a different y value. So dot y, we're going to say if that is less than 700. Again, we don't want the player flying off the screen here. We'll do a with animation dot spring once more, right? Makes sense for jumping. Add a brace player position dot y plus equals 50. Alrighty, and let's hop out of this long press gesture, and we'll create a variable for, I think we had the drag gesture last. We'll do our sum gesture. We're going to reference our drag gesture with our empty brackets. Dot on changed. We're going to use the braces instead of the brackets. Value in with animation. And we're going to use the dot ease in out, and we can do the one with the duration as well. I'm going to set this to be 0.1 so it's very quick. And then we're going to take the player position dot x equals value dot location dot x. This is going to only allow the dragging to move left and right. Alrighty, outside of this drag gesture, we should be good to go. So let's go ahead and now handle our game logic. It's a good idea, especially when you're making games, to comment out as much as you can. And let's create our function to start the game. We don't need anything within the parameters, and let's add our braces. We'll have our game timer question mark dot invalidate. So this is going to kind of reset our timer. We'll do the exact same with the score timer question mark dot invalidate. Next, we'll have our game timer equals timer, the capital T dot scheduled timer with time interval. And we're going to do the one with the repeats. So for the time interval, we're going to set this to be 1.2. We're going to set the repeats to be true, and we don't need this block here, so we can go ahead and get rid of that. Next, we're going to add a brace outside of the brackets, underscore in. We'll then handle our spawning. So we'll reference spawn enemy. I know we're like, wait, we're getting rid of errors, and now we're going to add a whole bunch more. We'll add a move enemies function here, and we'll also add the check collision, right? This is going to check to make sure that we haven't run into any other enemies. Let me go ahead and indent this so it looks better. So many errors, they'll all get fixed in the end. So fun. We haven't even been able to see our user interface we created yet. Okay, outside of the game timer, let's go ahead and handle the score timer. This is also going to equal a timer, and we'll do the dot schedule timer with time interval once again. Let's set this to be 1.0, and for the repeats, let's also set this to be true. We can also get rid of this block here. We'll add our brace. We'll say underscore in, and we'll handle if the game is over. So we're going to do the if and then exclamation point game over. So as long as the game isn't over, our score is going to plus equals. That's going to continuously add up the score over time. Alrighty, let's go ahead and get out of our start game logic here. So we're going to have three braces below, or just make sure you're outside of that function. And let's create a function to spawn enemy. We'll have it say let random x. So this is going to spawn it on a random x kind of value from the top of the screen. We're going to have this equal a cg float dot random. We're going to do the in autofill here, and we can choose a range. So I'm going to do mine 50 to 350. Typically the far left here is like 0 to 50, if you can kind of see where my mouse is, and then like 350 to 400 is going to be over here on the iPhone. You can adjust this as needed, and for the range we have the triple dots there. I also want mine to have random sizes, so let's go ahead and handle that as well. Random size equals cg float dot random in, and let's do, how big was our player? Scroll back up here. Our player was 40 by 40, so let's have these be like 20 to 40 maybe, or maybe even 20 to 30. So for our range, let's do 20 dot 35 maybe. We can always play around with this. Cool. Afterwards, we're going to create an if bool statement. So if bool dot random, we're going to use our little ampersand here, and bool dot random again. Add a brace here, and let's have our new enemies. So let new enemy equals enemy position cg point, and here's where we can reference our x and y. So for the x, we're going to do our random x, and for our y, we're going to go ahead and start them all the way on 0. While still within this bracket for the enemy, we're going to do a comma. We're going to reference their size, and this is going to be the random size that we've created above. Cool, and outside of this bracket here, we'll then have our enemies dot append new enemy. So that's going to add that new enemy to our array of foes. Now let's handle the movement of our enemies. So we're going to create another function, oops, and for moving the enemies, add a brace here, and we're going to say for index in enemies dot indices, add our brace here with animation within the brackets. Let's set this to be linear, and we can even add a duration. I'm going to set this to be 0.6. We can play around with it after. We'll then add a brace, and we'll have our enemies, and then we're going to reference our index within the brackets dot position dot y plus equals 30. So this is going to kind of move the enemies and have them raining down on the screen. And I just have the linear duration. You may even want to shorten that. Let's try 0.3. We can play around with it after if we're not happy with how it looks. Wonderful. And because we don't want our program to kind of blow up when there's too many enemies, or maybe they've been playing for a few minutes, we're going to take our enemies, and we're going to have the dot remove all, and we're going to determine where we want to remove them. So in this case, let's do our $0 dot position dot y, and let's set this to be greater than 750. So any of the enemies that kind of fly off the bottom of the screen, we're going to kind of call and remove them all. All right, outside of our function for moving enemies, we're almost done, I promise. We're going to create a function for checking collision. So this is how we're going to check to see if our player and our enemies have intersected with one another. If they have, it's game over. If you maybe want to like take away a player life or something like that, totally up to you in our game. In mine, you get one try and that's it. So we're going to reference our enemy. So we're going to say for enemy in enemies. We're going to add a brace here. Autofill is helping out here. We're going to have our distance. So say let distance equals, now we're going to reference the sqrt, all lowercase. We're going to add a brace, and we're going to say POW. And here's where we're going to include our player dot position. We're going to use the autofill here, dot x. And then we're going to minus the enemy dot position dot x as well. Then we're going to do comma 2. Now outside of this bracket, we're going to add space and a plus sign. We're going to add another POW with the player position, and this time we're going to do the dot y. We are using a circle after all. We're going to check the x and y position, and we're going to minus that from the enemy dot position dot y comma 2, and we should be good to go. Alrighty, and then we're going to use an if statement to basically say, okay, if the distance is too close, we're gonna game over. So if distance, then we're gonna say less than enemy dot size divided by 2 plus 25. Go ahead and add a brace here. Game over is now going to equals true. And let's also take our game timer. Dot, that question mark, dot invalidate. We'll do the same thing for our score timer. Question mark dot invalidate. All right, we just need to reset our game and add our enemy struct, and we should be good to go. So let's get out of our function of checking collision, and we'll create a function to reset game. Get a brace here, and we'll have our player position equals CG point. What did we have it before? Let's scroll to the top. It was 200 by 600. So when we reset the game, let's put our player with the X and Y values to 200, X and Y 600. Set our score to now equals 0. You might want to save the score with user default if you are doing some high score or something beforehand. Even do like if score is higher than user defaults update, right? Maybe we'll cover that in a future video. And we're going to take our enemies and we're going to do dot remove all. And we'll take our game over, and we'll now set this to be false. We are playing the game again. And once that's all been done, we'll call upon our start game. Very important with coding, the order in which these exist. Now we're going to go outside our braces here before the preview. We're going to create our struct finally for the enemy. We're going to conform this to be identifiable. Now we're going to create an ID. So let ID equals UUID. Empty brackets, create a variable here for the position. So position, which is going to be a CG point, and a variable for the size, which is going to be a CG float. It's something that's a little bit more dynamic. All right, let's go ahead and fix some errors. Oh, it's just me not knowing how to spell. What is new here? Let's go ahead and fix that. To be fair, position is a weird word to kind of spell, which if you created the structure beforehand, it might be a good idea. And in our circle for enemies, let's replace this to be enemy, or you can put enemies here. This is just gonna be a little bit easier to fix that. Sorry about that earlier for the enemy circles. Okay, cool. It might take a few seconds for our game view to load, but we can see that we have our game. We can see we do have our first enemy spawning. It took them a little bit to get going, so maybe we just need to adjust where the enemies are spawning from. Maybe they are spawning too high up. But let's go ahead and see if we can end the game. Perfect, the game ends and we can reset the game. Okay, so let's take a look at our logic, because we're probably just spawning the enemies either too slowly or perhaps too high up here. So if we want to make our enemies spawn faster, we're going to go to the with time interval on the game timer here, not the score timer. Let's set this to be 0.3. Now when we reset the game, we can see that the enemies are spawning much more frequently here. If you want to make it super hyper, set that thing to 0.1, you'll see it just starts raining down. Oh my god, they're moving so fast. So it's up to you how you want to kind of balance and adjust the game. This is actually pretty fun where they're moving really fast. Oh no, I stopped dragging. But let's also test our gestures. So we should be able to tap and move up. We can press for half a second and let go and move down. And we can see we can only drag the player only left and right. I'm using the mouse trackpad, but if you're using a phone, we could use our finger. Wait, this is actually pretty fun like this. So you can adjust the game balance as needed. Oh my goodness, it's gonna be so hard for me to do my talk track while surviving, but I'll manage. So if you want to take this game further, consider adding other animations, maybe some sprites, leaderboards, some other game features such as the, oh my goodness, what is it called? I'm trying to win, okay. Oh, what's it called? The Game Center? I think that's what it's called. Different integrations for the user. You can add different modes. Maybe you even allow the users to do easy, medium, and hard. And based on those conditions, you can spawn larger circles, more circles. That didn't hit me. We might have to double check the detection logic, or I'm just really bad. But you can see how you can kind of create this game. Very simple right now, but there's so much more that you can do with it. Add power-ups, slow down the enemies, difficulty settings, sound effects, leaderboards using GameKit. That's what I was talking about with Game Center. Try it out, let me know. Explore creating different games with the gesture. You don't have to take this template and expand upon it. You can use the knowledge you've gained from this video in order to create your own gesture game for users. I like what I've created here. I might take this one further and put it on the App Store. Are you ready to play? If so, drop a comment below if you have any questions, like and subscribe for more hands-on SwiftUI and iOS tutorials. And if you do want this example, I'm going to be putting it in the description below on my GitHub pages. So if you want to download it and try it out for yourself, feel free to do so.